So when I was in college at the University of North Texas, there's a thing, I think it's still rolling, called the Bruce Jam. Bruce Hall is a dormitory there where mostly the music students live. And so I was there, and you sign up for this thing as long as someone in the group lives in Bruce Hall. That's really the only requirement, or it used to be, for this thing called the Bruce Jam. And it was just a fun kind of dormitory jam, kind of a festival, but more just a kind of open jam. But at any rate, the week before, I had been on a hunt to find a cheap or free spare tire or a tire for my really terrible college ride that I had, which was a 1980 something full-size Blazer. And I found this junkyard that was supposed to be on Mingo Fishtrap Road. That was what the map at the front of the phone book said. And there's no such thing as a Mingo Fishtrap Road. It's actually an intersection. So I kind of gotten lost out of this intersection. And, this bizarre day happened. And so the following week, we had some buddies that wanted to play some stuff that wasn't for school, that was just kind of off the books. And I was like, this is a funny name that, I happened across last week, and put it down. And then here I am, 30 years later, or whatever it's been, 25 years later. I just kind of stuck before we could change it. So we left it at that. But as far as what it means, it kind of keeps us grounded on where we started, and is a constant reminder of that whole journey that we've had. So it's it's not the greatest name in the world, and it doesn't really signify anything in terms of those two words meaning, other than that it's a distinct place in Denton, Texas, where we kind of got our start. So that's kind of cool. It's not as if we're worldwide famous or something like that, and have too many people to answer to. So I think it's easier and probably just more pragmatic for us to stay true to what we like, I guess, is the simplest way to put that. The music and the band have changed throughout the years that we've been doing it. But again, we for better or for worse, I'm sure it's great to have millions of folks that adore your art and what you do and what you bring to their lives. But at the same time, then you have a bit more of a responsibility to stay down that road in terms of how it relates to directly to your living. We all depend on this at least to some degree to pay our bills and pay our mortgages and all that good stuff, which is a beautiful position to have kind of come to be in. But we don't have too much of a responsibility to stay the same, to stick with the same exact formula or do this or that. So I would never say such and such was not authentic because they changed up what they do, or because they added all these elements to their show or whatever. To be frank about it, I love entertaining folks. I really enjoy that part of my job, but the other part that is the songwriter and musician, that stuff obviously is probably more important in terms of creating content that you could share with folks in an entertaining way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you have to create that. We don't do a lot of covers, so it's the ones that we do are hopefully a testimony to what we appreciate and folks and bands and
definitely
musicians that have helped us develop that. So it's it's an interesting project that you've taken on, and it's a difficult thing. I don't think for a band that you can discount the element of entertainment. There are folks who I absolutely adore who get up with an acoustic guitar or behind the piano, and they don't say a word aside from the music. They don't say anything aside from the lyric, really, and they're brilliant, and it touches you. And I hope that people can get some of that from what we do. But obviously, there is an element of what we do that's I hope purely entertainment, because I've got great guys who know how to play their instruments really well. So there's that element of hopefully some sort of I'm trying to think of the right word, because I don't think it's a matter of being impressive. That's not really the thing, but just moving someone in a visceral way. And sometimes that's through your story, and sometimes that's through like I said, I have guys who are just masters at what they do, and it inspires me as a musician and as a human being to listen to them play, even if I'm on stage with them. So I think that's part of it as well, but I think that's still authentic. I don't think the word authentic needs to mean one thing, that, well, my heart was broken when I was 22, and so here's what it is. That certainly is, and that's an element of it for us, but I'm just as influenced personally by Prince, and the shows that he was able to put on, as I am by the lyrics that he wrote. I'm, just as I am by guys like John Prine and singer-songwriters who just bare their soul. So it's a very, we'd probably be here for hours if we were to go down every kind of avenue to answer that question fully, and I'm sure you probably experienced some of this while doing this research, because that word in and of itself means something different, not just to everyone, but in every circumstance. I think there is a bit of a freedom, though. I'll circle back to what I said. I think there's a bit of a freedom in not having that huge of an impact. I mean, I don't mean to demean what we've been able to do. That's certainly not the point. I feel great that we've got the fans that we have, and obviously trying to grow that community is important. But I think those people, I hope, realize that it's always morphing a bit, what we do and who we are as a band and individuals, just as in regular life. It's always changing, to reflect what authentic is at that moment in our lives. There's inherent value in pure entertainment.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If all someone wants to do, even if it's a musician, even if it's a singer or songwriter, if that's all they're out to do, I don't have a problem with it. It may not be what I need at that moment, but maybe it is. So it's not. It's. I think that if that is your only goal, then perhaps it's a short-lived goal. I don't think you can expect that music to live on all that long, but I could be wrong. I'm certainly not going to judge somebody else for what they're driven to do. But that being said, I've run across plenty of folks who treat this field, I'd say more than not, as an opportunity. They have the look, or they have the sound, or they have this or that, where they believe, or people that are working with them believe that they can be a star, and they have that sort of power. And I have no problem with that, but that's the main angle. And so then the business side of things takes a much bigger in the day-to-day life of those people than sitting and writing tunes or arranging tunes and thinking about music. Maybe other people get those assignments. And again, there's no problem with that for me. There's periods of my life where I can recall being either bitter or just kind of naysaying folks that fall on that side of things. But I think there is inherent value in that, man. I really do. I mean, I grew up kind of in the 80s, and so there's plenty of folks that at the time I loved that were probably right on that, on that avenue, and they still hold a place in my heart. So I can't. That music's not being made for me. You know what I mean? It's being made for somebody else, and if it touches their hearts, if it makes them happy, then I'm not one to say that it's wrong. But that's got to be their pursuit. I think that if you're an introspective, quote unquote singer-songwriter artist, and you get caught up in that world, and then you have a problem with it, well, that's kind of your fault too. You know what I mean? We chose our route to some degree, and I'm not bitter that I'm not, some household name, because I started a funk and soul band. Compared to even just a decade ago, it's much more difficult to use that as one of these streams of income to make a living. And if you can't make a living, it's difficult just to spend the time to do the craft.
Right.
It's kind of a double. But at the same time, there's more music being put out there of every type for folks to find what moves them. It's so much easier now than it was a decade ago or 2 decades ago, just to find what moves you. If you like, straight ahead jazz, or if you like fusion stuff, or if you want to hear that kind of thing, you could probably sit and do 10 minutes of research and find 40 groups that you're predisposed to like to some degree, and that just wasn't the case. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, really, that as long as those folks can sustain and keep making that music, I'd much rather have 50,000 groups that are really good at what they do, that are able to make a living, but maybe never hit it huge, than have 100 groups who are superstars.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the folks get left behind. So it's a weird time in the industry. But what you're saying is definitely where it's at, man, right now, in terms of like artists connecting with who might be predisposed to dig what they do,
right.
rather than the other way around, rather than the artist changing what they do to suit an audience, which, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you're looking to connect, then you're looking to connect, but it probably leads to better is very subjective, but it probably leads to better art, to be able to have an artist be able to find an audience rather than the other way around. There was a lot, when I was in high school, there was a lot of discovery for me that was based solely around liner notes. That if there was one thing, if I could be the old man for a minute, if there's one thing that I really feel is a different experience, that's where it's at. Because I sat with a record like I remember sitting in my grandmother's house and listening to my dad's records, and there was this Robert Palmer album, and I'm like, oh, it's a really cool sounding record. It's not something like, that he was kind of big in the 80s, had a couple big hits, but
right.
The record before that was not like that at all. It was way more raw. And so I was listening to that record, and on the liner notes, I'm seeing these guys, listed, the Meters and Alan Toussaint, who produced some of these tracks. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And as I'm digging through more records, I'm seeing these same names pop up, and that gives me this lineage. I'm like, oh man, why? If I like that, I'm going to like this. And man, there was an experience to it, because physically sitting down with it, and I think this is a reason why vinyl's making, a bit of a comeback as a medium. When you physically have to like take the album out of the thing and you put it on the player and you gently put the needle down, there's a visceral impact that whole process has on you. It's kind of not religious, but there's an element of that to the process, because it's not as much, it's not, if you're just scrolling to your phone and you hit a button and it starts playing, via Bluetooth in your car, that's not something you even think about. To sit down with a record and to do that, people listen to albums all the way through because you'd already gone through the trouble of putting on one track. You know what I mean? So
right.
There's something beautiful about that. I mean, I would never trade streaming for it, because the convenience of having everything I want to hear all the time is amazing. So I'm not one of these artists that's like, oh no, back in my day, not at all. But right. I do think that you keyed in on a great point, that it is a missing element for fans to connect with artists right then and there. If you want to, you can get on an artist's website, but it's a whole different thing, right? Mm-hmm. You're probably not sitting at home on a laptop when you're listening to stuff in your car, you're driving, you can't really do that. So there's a disconnect between that that I think what the artist is kind of trying to convey when you don't have access to that as you're listening to the record. There's some beautiful, man. I mean, and it's obviously it's a very difficult time to talk about Michael Jackson, and but I will say when I was a kid and looking at the Thriller liner notes and looking at all the folks that played this and that, they like a lot of very weird non-instrument things are listed in the tracks. It's just, there's something else that connects you to what was being done, and gives you, you feel like you have a little secret information, and that's right. A super cool thing as a fan for me. So that's the one thing I kind of get sad about in terms of putting out a new record, because it's, you can do other stuff now. Obviously, it's much easier for folks to see video and for you to have video content that accompanies a release, and that's cool. But there's something about those written liner notes. It's just super cool, man. It really is. Just as a fan, I'm 100% on that. I love the first thing you do when you hear of a new artist nowadays. The first place you go is YouTube, and so something like that, where you can kind of get as much of a visceral, and full-fledged impact as possible. And I love that. I mean.